Hello, my noble band of outlaws. Outlaw Samurai coming at you live with a video in a Mighty Morphin Power Rangers shirt, the OG team. Personally, I like Green Ranger, but Tommy Oliver was more powerful as White Ranger's Tiger form. But my favorite is when he plays the Black Ranger in Dino Thunder. So that little rant out of the way. In case you couldn't tell by the title of the video, I was watching Freestyle Swordsman's videos last night, and he was talking about bohis and blood groups. And I got to thinking, well, blood groove is not entirely inaccurate. And I know sword community is like, this is not a blood groove, it is a bohi or a fuller. But here's what I'm thinking of why it's called a blood groove. Traditionally, when you stab something, whatever you are stabbing into, the material encapsulates the blade. The theory behind the blood groove is if there's a little groove in the blade, that when the blade stabs through something and that material hits the groove, then it'll cause a vacuum effect and allow liquid that's inside your target to flow out easier. And that's not entirely incorrect. I have stabbed some plastic bottles on stands before, and the water actually flows out from the bohi on my katanas. So I can see the logistics behind calling it a blood groove, but historically speaking, it is not. It was placed in a blade to lighten the overall sword. So my feeling, if you're going to make a fantasy game or like write a fantasy book and you want to call the fuller and a blade a blood groove to make it sound cooler, go right ahead. But I am inclined to agree with Freestyle Swordsman in the respect that it is not a blood groove, it is a bohi on a katana, a fuller on a European sword. In just one moment. Sorry about that. Interruptions abound. But, with that in mind, so, as I was saying before, in fantasies and RPGs and, books of that nature, I can see, like, calling it a blood groove to make it sound cooler. But historically speaking, it is a fuller or bohi. It was never called a blood groove to my knowledge. So I agree with Freestyle Swordsman that it is not a blood groove. But I can also see instances where you would call it a blood groove to make it sound cooler. And how the effects of a blood groove, whereas like when you stab into a body, blood's supposed to pour out of the groove. And just a second. Sorry about that. Distractions, and irritations. But aside from that, if you're going to write a fantasy RPG, I can see the logistics of calling it a blood groove. And like I said before, I have stabbed things with a sword that has a bohi on it. And I have found that it flows out a little easier than a sword without a bohi. Now, whether that's the case all the time, I cannot say. That's what I have found through my experience. But I wouldn't say the difference is so great that it's significant in any way. Whenever you stab something, it's going to cause a vacuum effect. And this may only be the case on hard plastic bottles. Because when you stab something soft, if you've ever squeezed a sponge before, the sponge will take the shape of your fist until you release the pressure. It's the same thing, but reverse when you stab something. When you stab something soft like flesh, the blade will go into the flesh, but the flesh will immediately close and encapsulate around the blade. So that even means that if you stab something with a bohi, the flesh will make its way into that bohi to a certain extent. It might not completely fill up the bohi, but it will encapsulate inside the bohi to a specific extent or fuller. So calling it a blood groove, yeah, not exactly accurate, but not entirely inaccurate. Mostly, again, fantasy, RPG, games, blood groove to make it sound cooler. Historically, bohi or fuller. And secondary thing is, I've been noticing through Backyard Samurai, he says my content is good, but my videos are a little long. And the reason is, I don't really have editing capabilities, aside from pausing the video and coming back. So, I try to get as much as I can in as quickly as I can while still talking at a relatively slow enough pace to be understood, because I can talk extremely quickly. And I don't want to have you people go back and rewind the video every 10 seconds. It's like, what the hell did he just say? And like, what did he say? Well, all that crap. But, this has just been a little response to the bohi video, my thoughts on it. Again, fantasy, RPG, MMO, all those things. If you buy a sword in one of those games and it says with a blood groove or without a blood groove, then fine. It's to make it sound cooler. But if reality, historically speaking, bohi, fuller, without a bohi, with a fuller, without a fuller, all that crap, then yeah, I can see like, okay, this is strictly for, historically speaking, fuller, bohi, real world, blood groove, RPG, and fantasy. So, until next time, my noble band of outlaws, Outlaw Samurai, to all y'all, be crazy rednecks, be safe when using your weapons, and I will be starting to doing more cutting videos now that the weather is turning. So stay tuned for those. I'm out. Peace.